back to Into the West. Today we have a rankings video where we're going to be ranking all 18 match play scenarios. So we have Richard and Ian here, and each of us have our own ranking of all the scenarios. So we're going to compare them to see how our opinions differ, and we'll just go through each scenario one by one, and also just give us all a chance to justify why we place a scenario at a certain spot, and then see how all of the scenarios end up at the end.
I just want to say for me, I don't know about you guys. Well, as you know, I just wrote up my list. Like I finished writing my list about a minute before we started recording. So the precise values of where everything is maybe not exactly where I want them to be in the future. But plus minus one, I think they're in the right region. What really matters to me the most out of my ranking is the bottom four are exactly where they should be because they need work. They need to be rewritten a bit. Everything above that, they're fine scenarios. I just enjoy some more over others. But like my bottom, I think it's four. I'll have to look at it. I think it's four. I'm not big fans of.
I can't believe you're trying to cover your butt already before you even give your rankings. Too
Oh
many
no. The
excuses.
rest of it, give it. Let's I don't read the comments. Let's go. I don't care.
I don't think about you. I don't think about mom. That's what you said.
All right. Well,
Okay.
everyone just roast Ian's picks in the comments below then.
All right, so let's start with the first pool, everybody's favorite pool, and that is Maelstrom of Battle. And the first scenario out of Maelstrom of Battle is Heirlooms of Ages Past.
Wow. The best for first.
So long-term viewers of the channels should know where I'm gonna put this one. It's right at the fucking bottom. 18. Get it out of here. Rewrite it. Do something better. Be better, Games Workshop. Be better.
I as well have it at 18. To give Games Workshop a little bit of credit, it was worse last edition, and they improved it slightly. I think it used to end on a one or two, right? And then
It
they've
did.
at least that part isn't random anymore. But
Yeah.
everything else about this scenario, we hate it because it's random, and it's probably the
Yeah.
least skill dependent scenario out of the 18, I think.
Yeah. And to give credit, because I know somebody's going to say it, and I do agree with this opinion. If you do have, like, you're not playing on a timer and you have like 4 or 5 hours to play out this entire scenario to a natural conclusion, you can think about everything you're doing. It's not a bad scenario.
Infinite timelines, infinite possibilities.
In a tournament, it's horrible. It's the worst.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a clean sweep here. 18th best scenario. Just the biggest issue, aside from all the randomness, is also the VP distribution, right? If you hold the prize at the end of the game or the heirloom, you cannot lose, which is just not a good feeling, right? Like no matter how much there's no secondary objective that you can really play for.
Yeah. It's that, and the secondaries are kill the leader and break them and have a banner. You need to be able to close with the enemy army to do that. And if you're starting at two or three different points randomly on the field, it's going to take you many turns to even convene together before you can actually go after them, assuming they don't like womp part of your army, right? Or you get caught up like doing that to them, and then they just sit in the corner of the prize for the whole time. So like, yeah, it doesn't work.
And I find like the realistic applications for this scenario is one side picks up a prize randomly in a really weird spot, and then basically it's like almost a guaranteed win for one force, and there's not much else to it. Or the other one where variance goes, I guess, more normally and people don't roll the six, and then it becomes kind of a face-off where each force are sitting on one objective, basically waiting the game out, and then maybe like last turn people do something crazy, or it just comes down to, I don't know, who lost priority, so they flip second or something like that, and it becomes a really cagey and like not very satisfying game.
If you hold the prize, you have 6 VPs, and then if you get all the other objectives, you can actually draw. But realistically, that's not going to happen, because if you hold the prize, your opponent has to break you, kill your leader, and kill your banner while having a banner. That's just it's next to impossible when your opponent's trying to run away with the prize.
While preventing all those things from happening to themselves. Because if any one of those things happen to yourself and you don't have the prize, your opponent gets the 7 and like you can't catch them. Like it's just
I think as like competitive players, when you're in a tournament and you want the scenarios where hopefully the better player wins, I think this one is like the exact opposite of that. Maybe if you were a less serious player and you didn't care at all about winning, then I can see you having some fun with it because there is a big like random aspect to the scenario. But yeah, it's if you're there to win, if you're there to distinguish yourself in terms of skill, like this scenario is not it. So
just like imagine you're playing against a Harad list. Suladan runs out, digs up the prize, runs into the corner of the board, and the rest of their army runs at you. You can't win.
yeah.
You literally cannot win because Suladan's all of the points, like 12 points is sitting on him, like or something stupid. Like that's a really stupid example, but like you know what I mean? Like it's just ugh.
So Heirlooms is locked in at last place, having 3 rankings of 18th place.
I don't think I kind of hope we don't have that much agreement on the rest of the list because this is I'm pretty happy with that one. That's pretty funny.
Well, let's see. The next scenario is also an Heirlooms. Oh, sorry, it's also a Maelstrom scenario, and that is Hold Ground. Personally, I have Hold Ground at 10th, which might be a little controversial.
I've got it at 13. But to be fair, I ranked all of the Maelstrom ones kind of low.
I hate agreeing with Ian, but I'm also at 13 somehow.
Oh damn! It's for me. So I ranked, like I said, I put all of the Maelstrom ones kind of low, like they're in the bottom half. But it's more like Heirlooms aside, it's more just because of like the variance you can get in Maelstrom games because of the Maelstrom, rather than the actual like way the objectives are scored. And I wouldn't want these scenarios to go. I think having 3 Maelstrom ones in the game is good. They're just not my favorite because of like if you roll, I don't know, you have 4 warbands and every single one of them rolls a 2, you can get screwed, right? It's just kind of like the variance with that. Not to say that that's going to happen, and you know, it takes a while to learn how to play these scenarios, especially with the armies that you have. But you can end up with a lot more ones that are just like, oh, cool, I lost because I at the start of the game. Both of these other ones that are Maelstrom also get better if you're not on a timer or you have more time to play them out.
Yeah. And what I do like about Hold Ground specifically is that it does at least encourage meeting in a central location, which guarantees combat. So you're going to get some gameplay there. The issue for this one, and you see this in veto tournaments, where it's usually vetoed off because it can heavily favor one side. There's certain armies that are just clearly better than others in this matchup. So if you have some sort of like drum or march or some really quick moving army, then it is insanely advantageous to get to the center first. And it's also probably if you're playing like an all hero or like a very elite force, this is the Maelstrom one that you would like to play out of the 3.
You know, being a Maelstrom scenario, it's never going to be ranked super high, just right off the bat. Personally, I've been screwed by it many times, or especially Ian's example where you roll 3 ones, or you might 3 warbands down to 1 on the first turn, and then second turn you roll 3 ones again. And then at that point you just have no chance because even if you come on the board, you're not going to get to the middle in time. I also have a slight bias, I'll admit, where I generally will rate scenarios that end on a 1 or 2 lower. I don't like that. I think if I had to choose, I would prefer all scenarios to end on a quarter. I like knowing when the game is going to end exactly. So that also takes a little bit away from my score. But I do like the central objective location. I value Heroic March a lot, and it rewards you for taking Heroic March in this scenario. And yeah, generally I like how the scenario is played, and the only thing bringing it down is the randomness of the deployment and the 1 or 2 end.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I find the gameplay usually pretty strategic. So, like, there's a good balance between, like, how much you should run to the center versus how much you should fight before getting to the center, or like cornering off the opponent. Or, sometimes I've even seen people who lose the game because they get too greedy trying to, they lose priority the first round, which is usually an advantage. And then they're like, oh, I'm going to destroy this warband that is out alone in the middle of nowhere. So some of the tips that, we gave for Maelstrom in the past doesn't is kind of counterintuitive in this one. And like Charles even brought up, like, we also gave the advice of, a lot of times if you get a 2, you can might it down to a 1. While this one, that could be actually game costing, depending on the situation. Like, if you do might down to the 1 though, and you have the slower army, let's say you don't have a march and the opponent does, that could lose you to the game actually, even if you're technically saving that warband.
Yeah. I mean, it's also kind of the easiest one out of the Maelstrom ones to play. There's only one objective you got to worry about.
Okay, so we have Heirlooms in last place and Hold Ground in front of it so far.
Yeah, so the average score of Hold Ground is actually 12. It's kind of bottom 2/3, but barely.
Guess what I put in 12?
We'll have to find out.
It's Battlefield. The
Okay.
next scenario.
Okay, so the final scenario we have is Command the Battlefield for Maelstrom of Battle. And Ian's already revealed his ranking, that it's 12th.
I have it at 11.
Okay, again, I'm going to be a little controversial here. I have it at 8th.
Oh, that is high. Top half, baby.
Top half for Maelstrom. Barely. Like, it just pips in there.
So,
Charles loves Maelstrom.
so
Breaking news.
No, I do not like Maelstrom.
Whoa. That doesn't sound like Charles at all.
So, the thing that Richard brought up, I think earlier, where your opponent like can come up behind you and destroy a warband, I find that is less likely to happen given how this scenario works, where you want to be spread out. And even when it does happen, it can often work in your favor, because if they're committing warbands to come on and destroying yours, the game's going to end sooner, and they're committing more of their models in one quadrant. So personally, that's happened to me before, and I've gotten a win out of that, where they basically kill you too quickly, and then their models are not spread out enough. I will bring up another bias I have, which it's a personal bias, where I don't enjoy playing against deathball playstyles. And this scenario is very like anti-deathball. So like if you don't like playing Elven shooting in a blinding light or a Shade Angmar kind of armies, you'll like this one. Obviously, it's still got the downsides of being a Maelstrom. You don't know exactly when you're going to come up, and deployment can be rough for you. But I think that just based on how the scenario is and the objectives of being in 4 quadrants, even with the worst deployment, you getting screwed over, you losing a warband early, whatever, it, it's way easier to come out of it with a win compared to the other 2 Maelstroms. And because of that, I don't mind the random deployment as much.
It almost feels like a domination type match. Like once you get into the end game, like we were trying to scramble for the 4 different points. I mean, this has the extra caveat, you have to be wholly within and you can't be within the center. But I think I've said this before. This is probably, well, it is my favorite out of all the Maelstrom ones, just because of how it works and how like the objectives are split up. And also you don't feel nearly as punished if your opponent puts you in like the corner of a board in this scenario. Like it's not great. You'd rather be like using your army to do other stuff, but it's not devastating, right? At least they're still contributing towards like the end goal or the end of the game. Whereas like Retrieval, if they're put 24 inches away from any objectives or not, or Heirlooms, they're not doing anything. Or if they get bottled in by terrain and like half a warband of the opponent's troops and hold the ground, they're not going to do anything. Yeah, it's a fine Maelstrom one.
I agree with you guys. And I think it shows. We all rated it as the best Maelstrom scenario, and coming in with a huge average score of 10.33. So we're moving up.
All right. Now let's go to pool 2, which is hold objective scenarios. So the first one is domination. I have it at number 1.
Ah, my turn for scandal. 7.
Not scandal. Knowing you, that's not that controversial.
I'm actually a bit surprised that Charles is, well, and Ian's is just wild. So yeah, again, like we said, comments. Let us know what you think of Ian's pick here. But I'm a bit surprised at Charles because I actually thought he would pick another one for his number 1. But we'll get to that later. I picked it as number 1 as well. It might be the more vanilla pick. I've changed my number 1 a few times over the years, but I think I've kind of come back to Domination because as we get more like experience and stuff, and it's just always a good game. Almost always. Like it's just so consistent. I'm never disappointed in playing it. And for the most part, people do have this scenario in mind while building armies and stuff. So you rarely come up against a list that just cannot play the scenario at all, unless they're just bring like all hero or something like that. It's just no one feels kind of screwed when this scenario gets rolled.
About us, it's a classic.
So maybe I'm like biased here because I don't know. I've been Domination has been out in the scenario pack and basically unchanged, like some small changes for what, like at least 10 years. And I've played this scenario so many times. It's fine. It's a fine scenario. Scenarios that are fine in my book go around the middle of my ranking. I'm not like pumped to play it, and I'm not disappointed to play it. It's domination.
That's fair.
It's kind of subject to some kind of like random bullshit too, a little bit more than like the other ones. Fuck, like I know I've done this to at least Charles before, where like you just get a random lucky bow shot at the end of the game and pick a guy off on an objective, and now your opponent went from like up by 2, and now you're winning the game, right? And it's a little bit subject to that, not always, but or some people like run away because of courage test. But like that's list building. It's a fine scenario. The positives, negatives, it kind of comes down to list building, like in a matchup on a head v head, right? And then the scenario doesn't really have an effect on that. I don't know. It's fine. It's good. It's not great.
So putting in number 1, I guess I have a little bit of explaining to do. So I disagree with Ian about the end of the game lucky shot thing, which that can happen on any scenario that where you're holding objectives. I think it might even be less punishing because if you think about like breakthrough or whatever, not all the objectives are worth the same amount. At least in domination, they're worth the same amount. So like you won't feel like one is more you're more screwed if you lose it. What I like about this one is that both players have a say in where the objectives are. So you won't potentially get screwed over because you lose the roll off to choose sides. You end up with an unfavorable side of the board because you're involved in the process of putting down the objective. It's almost like even most of the time I find that you don't even care that much if you get like the unfavorable side of the board because most likely there'll be like a couple objectives are really easy for you to capture. And then obviously it has the anti-death ball aspect to it that I like, where objectives are usually pretty far apart because they have to be at least 12 inches from each other. So armies that I hate playing against, like most elven factions, they struggle a little more, and as do dwarves. Depending on the dwarf build, of course, it's like numbers is like super important in domination. I enjoy this scenario. I always find it to be strategic, and also just the deployment at half is nice. While I do sometimes like deploying a little farther away for certain armies, I think that being able to deploy at half is also a big bonus.
I agree with a lot of Charles's points. But just to add on, another one is I think as competitive players, it's like the opposite of our argument for heirlooms, right? That one is like random, 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 which is frustrating in a competitive environment. This one is, you do have a lot of say. Like Charles said, objective placings. It's a 25% end. And Yeah, even the ability to deploy on your full half of the board, that probably takes down some of the shooting variants, right? Just having almost every variable in your control is just something that I think I enjoy in a tournament setting. Like, top table, for all the marbles at a big tournament, you want to play a scenario like this because if you lose, then most of it will come down to how you played the scenario.
All right, give us an update of where the standings are.
Yeah, so Ian dragged us down here, but that's okay. But still, currently domination average score at 3. So that is significantly higher than the Maelstrom pool.
Okay. So the next scenario in this pool is capture and control. Personally, I have this at 7th.
Yeah,
Oh
put
my
it at
God.
8.
Okay. We're pretty close. I promise to the audience that we did not check scores beforehand with each other. I don't like having the exact same score, but yes, I have the same as Charles again. I'm also at 7.
It's
Yeah.
interesting that we kind of agree, though, the three of us, 7th and 8th.
It is. I will say though, I find it funny that you guys are so different. Domination and capture are so different for you. They're like rated like right next to me for me. It felt weird for me to put them like maybe one apart, but like or right next to each other because they're so similar. They're so
I
similar.
I think the biggest one is the end on 1 or 2, right? Maybe Ian, maybe you don't mind or prefer the ending on 1 or 2.
I mean, that's fair, but most of the time when I play that, I especially in a tournament setting, with the way people construct armies most of the time, it's by the time one of us breaks, we're going to be getting close to like timing out. So usually I just say, cool, once one of us breaks, we get one more turn. Anything after that is gravy. And I mean, you guys know me. Usually I'm the one who's struggling for more turns. So operating in that mindset, it works for me. And it's the same as knowing it ends at 25%, But maybe I could see for some, like if you play like faster, you can get through turns quicker. Then I can see the randomness of not knowing if it's a 1 or a 2 makes a difference. And obviously, we've all been screwed by the game not ending on a time when we need it to, right? But it goes both ways.
Yeah. The other, I guess, main difference of this one is that the models don't have to stand on the objective to capture it, so you can leave after. Did that play into the factor of your rankings, either of you?
I mean, not really. Again, like I put them side by side. I do think, well, based on what you guys just said about domination, I do think it's like maybe slightly better. The fact that 3 objectives have to be placed on the center line in capture and control means like you are fighting over like a huge wide area, which is cool. You do use most of the board in a similar way to domination, maybe not the same way.
It's still a very solid scenario. One of my, I guess, pet peeves about this scenario, how many times have you guys had someone actually roll for the deployment and deploy like past the 12 in the back? Because that's such a handicap to your own force. And it's almost like a necessary detail to the scenario. I don't know. Most of the time, I'm pretty sure like 99% of the time, me and my opponent will just be like, okay, let's just not roll because I'm just going to deploy with the center
Yeah.
12 inches.
It would be a much more interesting game if you had to deploy in the back half.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would be kind of okay with that just to switch things up
Um,
because it to me is just a necessary detail.
it is kind of like redundant. I agree, especially yeah, because yeah, like you said, most of the time you just even if you are a shooting army, you don't want to deploy in the back half. You want to deploy 1.5 inches away from whatever like a first turn charge, just so you can get at least one round of shooting, maybe two. Like, yeah, it is kind of redundant. Richard, you would have hated last edition when every scenario was like this.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to go back a little bit to the models not needing to stand on objective. So on one hand, more elite armies, that helps them where they don't need to waste an entire model like a 20-point cav or something sitting on an objective. They could just leave and use that model again to capture something else. So that's really handy. But then on the other hand, it's like at the near the end of the game, it can help board armies, lower courage armies as well, because if their models run from failing a courage test, they still have their objectives. So
Yeah,
I don't know if that I lean one way or the other with that rule. I like
yeah.
the idea of it, how it's different than all the other objective scenarios. Yeah, so that's one thing I like about it. It's like it's really interesting.
because the way I'm okay with that rule because the way the objectives are placed out. So you're basically guaranteed because there's 3 along the center line. Those ones are going to be contested most of the game, unless like terrain or something is blocking it. Like most of the game, those are going to be switching back and forth. So the fact it's only one on either side that you have to like actually launch, like put some guys in to try and go capture in your opponent's one makes a difference. If it was laid out on like a 5, like the 5 on like a die where it's like 2, 1, 2, then that would be a horrible rule because you just end up fighting over the middle and it would be like a bunch of draws and like low scoring games, right? But because there's 3 on the middle that are always switching hands, I think it works. And also, it's a very interesting way because you can just knock because it happens in the end phase, right? When you score them. So if you have one guy who sneaks in and still has his base partially on that one, now nobody gets it. So
I
it
mean,
can be
yeah.
quite interesting
I mean,
compared to domination.
I do like this being a little bit different than the other 2 objective scenarios in this pool. I can see why Charles might not like it as much because of this reason. It's better for like death ball armies. It's an objective scenario that an army that is more elite and more clumped up can actually have a really good chance of winning. And I think that's still important because you don't want you to feel like if you take an elite army that you're going to get basically rolled over in this whole entire pool. So the average score for this one is 7.3.
Currently in second.
Currently in second, yeah.
Okay, the final scenario of this pool is breakthrough. So personally, I have it as number 3.
Ooh.
Oh, okay. I've got it at 5, which is my highest rated one so far.
I need to stop saying my score last because I also have it at 5, and then it just sounds like I'm copying someone, either you or Ian. But it's just because I'm saying it last. So
Okay, next one, you'll go first. So we all put it in like the first third. Yeah, Ian, let's have you start first.
I don't know. I think I just like the way the scenario says breakthrough. What do you need to do in this scenario? You gotta break through. I like the way the 4 objectives are laid out, and it's still like all the other domination, the other ones in this pool. Like you still need to play for all of them, but because they are spread out, there's kind of, do you focus on one side and try to swing around? Do you go like a broad front to just see where you break through, right? But the fact that the middle of the board, which is the easiest way to your opponent's objective, isn't worth anything, right? And there also is like a heavier emphasis on defending the one objective that you have and preventing your opponent, right? So it's the nature of you need to get through, but you also need to stop your opponent from getting through. And I like that dynamic a little bit more.
it's a very simple, easy to understand scenario, and it'll guarantee a lot of action. There's a lot of incentive to get in there. And then end condition is 25. So I don't think it's anything like too crazy or anything too special, but it's just pretty solid all around.
Yeah, this one is very close to domination for me. They're like neck and neck, and it has a lot of the same upsides that I like that domination has. The end condition, the half board deployment, the anti death ball aspect to it. I like all those things. I think where domination is slightly better, in my opinion, is the objectives are more even because breakthrough it's still like all the other objective scenarios where they are put in set places, and sometimes in certain boards you can be at a huge disadvantage just not picking your side. That's like the only downside, I think, which is why domination is first, because I feel like that's the only one where you can have some control over that, and that's kind of special about it. But besides that, breakthrough is pretty perfect for me. I think it's great having that one objective in the back being worth so much because that encourages aggressive play, encourages a lot of combats early on in the game. There's not much I would change about it.
Okay, so this scenario jumps into second with a score of 4.3.
All right. So let's go to pool number 3 now, which is object scenarios. And the first one is seize the prize. Richard, what do you have it as seize the prize?
Yes, here's my original answer. I have it at number 12.
Oh,
Don't know if that's controversial, but you know.
we'll see. Charles, where are you?
I have it at 11th.
Ah, I am controversy. This is one of my four. I have it at 16. Don't like it. It's
Well, yeah, I mean, if you know Ian, you can't just sit back and shoot. So, or you
it's
shouldn't.
it's not even that. I just ranked breakthrough, the one where you have to get up in your face like quickly, as like my favorite one out of the objective ones. It's not that. It's
Let me ask you a question. I know you're not a huge fan, but why would you put it behind like Maelstrom?
because, and this is a theme with all the ones that I really don't like, is all of the points rest on like one thing, one single thing. And if you get like a little bit lucky, it's gone and it's out of reach. And you have your opponent has, or if you're whatever, one person has no chance of ever like catching or winning, right? Besides a Hail Mary. And I don't like that because I don't think it encourages good play. And I don't think it like we talk about competitiveness, it doesn't reward good play. There are things that come down to this, but this is one of those scenarios where we say all the time it comes down to whoever wins the move off on like usually the second turn, depending on the army builds, right? If you have the setup that you can get onto it and you get it dug up in the first turn and bubble wrap it, then you win in the first turn. Or, you have a 70% chance of winning, whatever.
Technically, I'm a little bit swayed. We're not going to change our rankings in this, but I see what you mean. Like, I don't like the coin toss like aspect of this. But what I will say is that from my experience, the gap between like the top players who know exactly what to do in this scenario compared to even like, someone more in the middle tables, the game plan for this is significantly different and it matters a lot. And so I guess my argument here is that it's a coin toss, but you need to know exactly what to do to get there. Because if you the instant you like outplay the opponent a little bit or they slightly misplay, then you can almost like, guarantee the victory off of their misplay. So it's very important to know exactly what your army needs to do, not only in that scenario, but again in that matchup. So to me, like, I guess that's where the skill part comes in, just a game plan scenario. So it kind of works a little bit differently than all the others.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you just said. One thing to add is I think that yes, it is a scenario that relies a lot on what happens in the first two turns and whether you can roll that 4+, but we shouldn't treat it like it's in the same ballpark as rolling a 6 and picking up an heirloom and the game ends. Picking up the prize only gives you 3 VPs. So you can easily pick up the prize and still lose the game. I think there's a huge difference between this and something like heirlooms. And yes, you're at a huge advantage if you pick it up, but I think it's way more balanced than heirlooms. And I don't think it's near the bottom in terms of being like a coin toss scenario, even though on the surface it does look that way. Because like if you break your opponent without breaking, that's 3 VPs. That already ties you for them picking up the prize. So I actually don't think that holding on to the prize guarantees a win. Yeah, so I don't think it's as imbalanced as maybe Ian thinks, and that's why I kind of have it in the middle, like maybe the higher end of the bottom.
So that's a good point. Counter to that is that I don't think it's the fact that Seas has it is balanced. The points are actually balanced really well, but it's more so that Heirlooms is balanced so bad that even though this isn't great, it's just like by comparison, it looks a lot better. But I do agree that like the way it is scored is better than it definitely is better than Heirlooms.
I think if you take out like the flying aspect of it, which probably ruins a lot of the seize the prize games, like Guai here cheesing or whatever, bat swarms and stuff. Like if you take that, like those crazy outlier armies out, I think it becomes a bit more tactical. If it's like infantry and cavalry.
Yeah, yeah.
Or any model that carries a prize moves maximum 6 inches. That could make it interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. My closing thought to this is How many times do you roll this in a casual game, like when you're rolling out scenarios and you go, let's re-roll it? Because I do that almost every time. I don't know about you guys, but
Is it because it's not fun, or is it because you don't think it might be good tournament practice because it's so different than anything you might face?
I think it's more because it can be so swingy. It's one of those ones where you can lose it turn two, you know.
Well, fair enough. Seize the Prize ends up with an average score of 13, so coming below Hold Ground and Command the Battlefield. So we actually prefer, on average, those two Maelstrom.
Okay. Next one we have is Destroy the Supplies.
I put this one pretty high.
I don't know exactly you guys' opinion, but I think I might be the controversial one here. The three of
So
us.
All right.
I'm at third.
Okay.
Oh, fuck you, Richard.
Ian,
I'm
what'd you
at
have?
three as well.
Yes, I said it first.
So close!
Yeah, I got it at 3.
I have it at 14.
Oh,
Oh
geez.
shit!
Okay.
Drag it down, baby. Oh my god.
So one aspect that we haven't talked about yet, which we could have talked about it in Heirlooms, but it just didn't get brought up, is I absolutely hate banner VPs, especially if you're not playing veto system. It erases like a third, almost like a third of the factions from the game, making them not viable. Or maybe not, maybe that's a little too strong, but it makes them start the game at a handicap. And I just don't see why you should do it from a game design perspective.
So that's fair, but I'm kind of for the same reasons. Like I'm the opposite. And again, there is the bias here because I do play more elite armies, so I always throw a banner in. So it doesn't change how I build armies that much anyway. But if you are gonna play like those armies that just spam out units, say, I don't know, like Goblin Town, like that, that have a lot of advantages in other scenarios, like in all of like the objective scenarios. And maybe this isn't the most elegant way of doing it, but this is a way, just including the banner VPs, is a way to nerf those other factions in scenarios like this, right? It is a way to put in a check, which I think is necessary for an overall game balance, like game design, game balance thing. Again, not the most elegant way to do it, but I like it. I think
I,
it works.
I'm kind of with you there, Ian, but my only pushback is that they designed the armies with no banners before having what I assume before having too much thought into the banner VPs. It doesn't seem like it was the other way around. I don't know. I could be wrong.
Could have been done better, but I think it is a nice check.
It's not the only thing why it's ranked so low for me. If it was the only thing, I think it would have to be a more significant downside. The other thing is, you know how we were just explaining why we love domination and breakthrough so much? This scenario is potentially like the opposite of that in terms of like being super passive, and you could just sit back and you're just waiting for the draw sometimes. If both sides have a banner, and then let's say like this is like the final game of the tournament. No one wants to be the one to move forward and try to risk their army. And a lot of the times you just have a very passive game where like not much happens. And to me, that's not good scenario design.
So yes, that is a factor, but the fact that it doesn't, like, it only takes one model, right? Who I can't, I think they can't have fought a fight. Is that what it is? Or no, they can still have fought that turn to be able to burn a supply, right? They just can't have done
No,
like
I
magic.
don't think they could have done. You can't have done anything to have to burn it.
Okay, but the point is, it just takes one model getting around to your back into your opponent's lines, 2 VPs, right? So yeah, it can encourage that static thing where you both just sit there. But the incentive is because it's so easy and because all the objectives are spread out over what is that? That's 24 inches between, like, it is most of the board, right? There is the incentive is to go in there and get in there and fight, right? Because it's such a wide front. It's like there's going to be a gap somewhere where you should be able to get somebody through in it. So I don't know. In my experience, I've never really seen lists just line up there and like shoot at each other. Like, yeah, it can take a little bit of time for everybody to get in there and start fighting, but once people are fighting, things usually happen. And I think that's part of the reason I like this one so much is because it has the balance of you know, you got to attack, but you also have to defend. And I mean, it's the same kind of thing for as breakthrough for me, right? There's a style of scenarios I seem to like, you know, having like a balance between the two.
Yeah. So I'm with Ian here, obviously, like given our rankings for this one, but I think in theory, Charles's fear makes sense, but I think in practice, most of the time it doesn't play out that way because the objectives are fairly like spaced out. You need a horde army to be able to really solidify all three positions defensively, and most horde armies are not able to win in a shoot war. Sure, like maybe Corsairs, maybe like Serpent Horde, but aside from those, like it's very rare to have that combo. And if you're gonna play like a really strong shooting force, which is like blinding light, elven bows, whatever, that's a more death ball force. And even at 800 points, it's very, very hard for one of those armies to build like castle around three of those objectives like that far apart. So you can usually, like Ian said, find a weak point where you rush in and then, steal a victory if they're going to just decide to sit back.
It's also nice that everything's worth 2 points. I will like the way everything is weighted, I do quite like in this because it's kind of a mixture of like a kill the enemy scenario because it's 2 for breaking, 2 for leader, 2 for banner. But then the other half of them are also on objectives. So it's kind of like a nice mix of those two variants and scenarios.
Yeah. I guess to end, I don't like the design of like just how it plays out sometimes, but I understand why you guys both like it. I do think that in most cases, like it doesn't happen that way where you just sit back and nothing happens. It's happened to me before, and I think that a well-designed scenario that would never happen. But fair enough.
I do think without the banner thing, it would also be a better scenario. I'm not a huge fan, so just adding that in there. So the final ranking for Destroy the Supplies is 6.7. So this means it slots between currently Capture, Control, Breakthrough. So it slots right between the two objective ones.
And the final one in this pool is Retrieval. Talked to a few people before who kind of said this as like a common comparison is with Storm the Camp, which it has a lot of similarities, right? It's like a diagonal board, and then you're trying to get to the other side because that's where the objective is. Yeah, so this one is, what do you guys have it as? I have it just below Destroy the Supplies at 15.
I have it at 16.
Oh shit. I am controversial. I mean, not that controversial. I have it at 11.
Yeah, you like it quite a bit.
So honestly, for me, the worst part about this scenario is setting up the board at the start of the game. Figuring out where that 6-inch no-go zone is, that sucks.
Yeah.
That is definitely the worst part of it. I do think it is. We'll see later on. I do have it ranked quite a bit higher than Storm the Camp. If you go from your starting line to where your opponent's objective is, moving 6 inches, I calculated a while ago. I think you have to do like 5 turns of uninterrupted movement, right? It is far. It is far for a 6-inch move model, right? To get to it, but the opportunity it's there because you can start right up there, right in your opponent's face, more or less. It's fine.
My theory of why Ian ranks us higher than the two of us is because Ian doesn't mind lower scoring games. Because I feel like it's really hard to score high in this game.
Or even play the primary objective because Ian can just sit on his objective and shoot, right?
Well, I mean, it can be like so. Yeah, it's funny you say that. I have won a tournament game before that because we rolled this scenario and I looked at I had dwarves, my opponent was all cap, and I was like, cool. I'm sitting on my objective and I'm gonna kill your leader and break you, and that's how I'm gonna win. That has happened. I have done that before, right? But I think this just kind of goes back to my thing before, where you got to go somewhere and you got to defend, and that is I like that kind of game style again. Like I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
Like you can't just defend, right? If you want to score big, but you can't just go offense, right?
Yeah, I don't know. The fact that you're not usually going after the main objective kind of says something. I'll agree that it's better than Storm the Camp,
Yeah.
but to me, that's not a very high bar. I think Storm the Camp is up there with really unfun kind of scenarios. Most of the time, you're not even going to have enough turns to walk up to the objective, pick it up, and then let alone walk back to your side off your board edge.
I agree, and again, to be fair, this is bottom half for me. Like I'm not putting it up super high. I still don't think it's a great scenario. It's it's fine. It's sorry, it's not fine. It's okay.
Mhm.
You know, it's okay.
Meh.
So I guess the average ranking for this one is 14. So currently a second worst scenario.
Also, I got to say, the idea of capture and control or capture the flag in Middle Earth, it kind of sounds fun.
It's a good idea for sure. It's just
It
in theory, it just rarely happens. So
yeah,
that's why I
it
don't.
needs a bit more. It needs some tweaking. Yeah.
Okay, so pool 4 now, which is kill the enemy. To start, we have Lords of Battle. My prediction for Ian's favorite.
Incorrect.
Nice try.
Incorrect. I have it at 6.
Okay, Richard.
Damn it. I have it at 6.
It's almost like we play very similar armies or something. I don't know. Similar play styles. Who'd have thought?
I have it at 12.
Oh,
Hmm.
okay.
So you're saying that Ian likes Retrieval more than you like Lords of Battle. Anyways, Lords of Battle.
I would be tempted to rate it higher. The problem is that like you pointed out in other scenarios, Charles, is you can end up where somebody does one wound to the enemy and then just sits there 24 inches away and goes, "I'm winning." And I don't like that. I've never had that experience, but I hate that can happen, right? And it could be in your best interest just to go, "Cool. I'm also going to sit at the back of the table and take a minor loss because otherwise it's going to be a major, and I'm like my VP tiff is going to go."
I guess another negative before we go on to the positives is that there's just certain matchups that are horrible, almost unbeatable armies are like the meme army. So that's even more frustrating. So if you come up against like a Sauron or like an all hero force, like the feeling of like in a tournament, random roll tournament, where you're like, I can beat any other army in this tournament, but this one, which is a meme army that's not going to win the tournament and you have to
Yeah.
play in Lords of Battle is such a bad feeling. That's like my biggest fear. Like when I
So
roll into that, it's like playing Sauron in like
yeah,
Lords of Battle or Vanquishers or something. It's like,
yeah.
no, just pack up and go home.
So Richard and I went to a tournament at the weekend before we were recording this, and somebody was running Vanquishers, and they played this scenario, and their opponent did not have a good time at all. Just bad time. It's for the reason that matchups like that can happen in this, and it's just not good, right?
Yeah. But I guess for the good parts of the scenario is that it deploys at the half, like we've talked about.
Mhm.
It's interesting that it's like a kill scenario, but the wound counter, like it adds some like extra elements to it. Stuff like killing horses or even like wounding heroes. Technically, like those are points. I think that's quite fun. And then when we do actually remember the might regeneration off killing other heroes, I think
It's cool.
that's a cool rule too. Like
Yeah.
pseudo blood and glory.
Yeah. It's a simple scenario, right? A lot of the ones in this pool are pretty simple, but it's good. It's not great.
So I can see why people enjoy this one or love throwing it into like a predetermined pack, to counter horde armies or whatever. The reason why it's so low for me, one is an ends on a 1 or 2. That's just personal bias, and then the other one is I just don't see it being very tactical. It's one of the ones where if you're a newer player and you're going into like a big tournament, this is like the one that it's the most straightforward. You probably have the biggest, assuming your army is built for it, it's probably the one you have the highest chance of winning in. It's just, it's one where you could just go in and then just kill things, which I understand the appeal of it, but in terms of the best player winning, it's not always the case. It's not as tactical as I would like compared to a lot of the ones we talked about before this.
One of the issues as well, like shooting this one and to the death, which we'll be talking about, is like shooting becomes amazing, like super powerful, where it gets to the point of potentially oppressive. Like, you have potential of castling yourself in a corner that choke points and stuff, and you're not really punished for it. And I guess like depending on the matchup, it could create like some really frustrating experiences.
I don't think a lot of us like games where it comes down to like how many sixes you can roll. or how many fights if you can win more fights than your opponent. This one kind of is like that, right? The more fights that you win, you're generally going to win the game. If you roll higher, you're generally going to win. But it's not necessarily the case with a lot of the other scenarios.
I mean, I would still push back a little bit. The fighting, positioning, and like combat micro still matters. Like you're still going to
Yeah.
beat a newer player.
Mhm.
It's similar for this one and for To the Death, but and I don't disagree. Shooting does become way better in these scenarios because of the advantage it gets you, because it allows you to pull the opponent into an area where they could be at a disadvantage. That takes a certain level of skill, right? Analyzing the battlefield, seeing where you want to fight, and then making sure your opponent comes and fights you there, right? It still takes some wherewithal of what you're doing and what your opponent has and what they can do to make sure that you nullify that, right? I agree it can be a very bad scenario depending on the table layout, though. Like if we're fighting in Osgiliath and it's just alleyways and I have the Dragon Emperor and you have Goblin Town, good luck, buddy. You're just gonna walk through and you're never gonna stand a chance, right?
All right. So the next one, right? To the Death.
Yeah. So, okay, so for To the Death, I have it in the middle. I have it at ninth. And
I have it at 2.
you? Okay. And Richard?
I'm at 8.
Okay.
You were almost right with the last one. It was between this one or Lords for me, though, which was going to be a pretty high. But I think this one is balanced better because it avoids the getting up by a couple points and then just leaving.
I'm surprised both of you like it better than Lords. I don't, because we talked about banner VPs. It's a 12-inch deployment, which bows in Lords of Battle is already kind of scary. And then Into the Death, it's borderline oppressive. If you're playing Veto and you're playing a shooting army, this is the one that you veto. At the same time, compared to any of the other ones in this pool, it's the most likely for a draw. You know, similar to a lot of the ones that we've rated like lower or will rate lower, it's always bad when there's occasions where it puts competitive players where they're in a situation where they're like, maybe we just shake hands first turn because we're not going to march on each other. That's not how we should be playing this game. I get like you shouldn't be maybe like thinking that competitive wise, but we are sometimes thrust into that situation.
It's a give and take of that, but the fact that this is the reason I put this higher than Lords is because it's the fact that that can happen, but it's not like that happens. You get one wound on something and then now you're winning the game. Like Into the Death, I get one wound on something. Who gives a shit? I'm one closer to breaking you, which is worth points, but it's not like now I'm instantly winning the game. You know,
So
that's why I put it higher than Lords, at least.
So yes, I did put it higher than Lords, but then Richard, I also rated it pretty close to you in like around the middle, right? So like we agree more than you think. As I explained earlier, I hate the banner VPs. It was a big struggle for me because I hate the banner VPs, but then it does end on a 25%. It was like, which one do I like more? What I like about it more than Lords of Battle is that it doesn't just automatically discount a third of the armies from the game and making them unfavored. To the Death, like whether you're playing a elite army or a horde army, I think you got a shot of winning. I don't think it's as skewed in terms of making so many armies going in. You make some good points about the shooting and deploying at 12 and just some games being unfun, but I find that it's more forgiving than Lords of Battle, and that's why it edges out for me ahead of Lords of Battle. It's got some of the same issues where I don't think it's as strategic as some of the other pools, but that might just be the nature of kill the enemy pool.
I have a question because I'm looking at like the scoring and stuff. Charles, you rated To the Death 5 rankings higher than Destroy the Supplies, but they're essentially the same like setup scenarios, but one has objective play and one is just killing. Like, is there a reason?
First of all, I thought we were focusing on Ian's rankings.
A diversion.
Maybe they need to be swapped. I don't know. I guess I also don't mind some of the VPs going towards 25%. I think that's unique to this scenario, right? Like there's no other scenario where it rewards you for quartering. It makes the game between when one force breaks and when the game ends, that section of the game more important, more crucial than the other scenarios that end on a quarter.
Okay, so somehow the average score here is 6.3, which is slightly higher than Destroy the Supplies at 6.7. I think partially due to Charles's horrid ranking of Destroy the Supplies.
How are you so wrong all the time?
Yeah,
Good.
I guess we can move on to the next one.
Okay, the final one of this pool, and I hope I'm less controversial for this one, is Contest of Champions.
Where do you have it?
17.
Oh, baby. Let's go. 17 club. Come on, Richard. Make it a triple. Make it a
15.
triple. Ah!
15? Oh,
Oh.
So I guess I'll go
It's
first since I have the different ranking here. I think I know why you guys rank it low and a lot of people, just because some of the matchups are just horrid and like kind of who will most likely win just by looking at the lists. And even
Oh, no, I just remembered this is my only tournament win against you officially. So never mind. This is number one for me.
yeah, so and also like even if the leaders are somewhat comparable, it comes off to like the first two turns, how priority goes and stuff like that. So I get it's really, really swingy. But at the same time, I mean, I still ranked it 15, so it's not like I'm ranking it high, but I feel like I have to say some of the good stuff because you guys are just gonna crap all over it. Is that when you do somewhat get a close start and on the occasion where like the game actually goes on for the normal amount of turns, it actually is a very, very fun scenario. Like if it actually works out the way it's supposed to be, where you have two comparable fighting heroes, the first two turns, nothing too crazy happens where one leader is not completely neutered, and then it actually becomes like a kill count race. I've actually had a lot of fun in a good amount of Contest of Champions, And I also do like that most of the time it doesn't go to time. A lot of natural endings for this scenario.
So, I mean, I think the reason you get natural is because you start in each other's faces, right? Like you start on the line. There's going to be fighting away like immediately. You're going to break with a reasonable amount of time left on the clock. It's just you're going to get natural conclusions because of that. My issue with this scenario is that the way the points are given out is fucking horrible. It's what is it? It's 10 out of 12 of them rely on only your leader. That's horrible game design. Horrible design. If there was, you could add a special rule where once your leader dies, it passes down to the next highest ranking hero, then it would be okay. Then I'd be fine with that many things. Or if you change it so like the leader getting wounded or dying isn't reliant on the other leader doing it, then it changes it a bit. The fact that like your main objective and one of your secondary objectives, everything relies on your leader. It's stupid. It's horribly pointed. It's a bad scenario. I like the idea of it. It's a great idea. It needs complete rebalancing of the way the points are scored. It's horrible.
yeah. I don't want to repeat too much of what you guys have said because I think I agree with most of the negatives. I think just starting off so close to each other is just a big problem because chance is always going to be a part of this game, right? And just having your horse shot off or you lose an important roll off, like that can just be over. And Richard brings up a point where like sometimes it can be a fun game of like an actual killing contest, but
Mhm.
that's kind of dependent on whether something extremely unlucky happens to one player, right? Whether it happens or not. If it does, then it's super one-sided. And just even like before even going into the game, sometimes this one is just like an auto veto because you know who your opponent is, right? If you're playing veto, you know who their champion is, and you're just like, yeah, I'm unfavored. I'm not playing this one. Just it's out of the question. In terms of like coin toss, it's not as bad as Heirlooms. I think Heirlooms is always going to be the winner when comparing these two. And we did do a video on some tips of how you can potentially win an unfavored Contest of Champions game. So I'm not saying that if you have the worst leader out of the two, you don't have a chance of winning. It's just even if everything goes your way, because you start off so close to each other, you could easily just lose that lead. And
Mhm.
I don't know.
I feel like I was pretty harsh on this because this one does like make me really annoyed. But in its defense, again, I like the idea of the leader being quite important and the kill tally thing. That's a cool idea. Also, having a scenario where like you have to start up right on the line is also cool because, like you guys have talked about, we have plenty of scenarios where you start 12 inches on the board and there's a 24-inch gap, right? Or even if you start at the half, you can deploy 18, 20 inches away, right? Having one the opposite of that where you're like right up there and shit's gonna get real quick, that's fine. That's good overall balanced with the other scenarios. It's good to have at least one that's like that. It's just the pointing of things is really it's not where it needs to be.
Yeah. Yeah, so I agree with you guys for pretty much all of it. It's just, I guess this one is my personal bias where I think I've had maybe more good experiences more than the average person. I've somehow had some decent games in this scenario. So I'm like, oh, it's not as bad as you would think. I mean, still 15th, but maybe not as bad. Okay, so
In the defense of contest champions, regardless of how much Ian says he hates it, he selected it for a pre-selected pack before, so it can't be that bad, right?
See, you forget is because for that pack, I looked at all the scenarios and I was like, what are the ones that nobody plays? I've never played these in the past like 3 years. I'm putting it in the pack because I was a TO and I was sick with power and I could.
Okay, so the average score for a contest is 16.3, so that now takes the place of the second blast.
Okay, let's move on to pool 5, which is maneuvering. And the first one is another fan favorite, Storm the Camp.
Yeah, so you got your guys' 17 is gone, so haha, I picked 17 for this one.
It's 16 for me.
15 because the other ones were all thinking that. I mean, if C's at 16, I could probably swap to it at 16. You know, I just nah. No. I'm happy with Storm being at 15. Actually, it's a little bit better than C's in my mind, but it's not great. My reasoning for it being so low is let's play 5 turns of walking at each other, and then the game starts. And this is on a timer too, right? This goes back to the kind of like the Heirlooms thing where it's if you have enough time to play this, I do quite enjoy the little like maneuvering and like shifting that can happen when you have this much many turns of moving towards each other. But you need 4 fucking hours to play out the scenario.
Yeah.
If you're playing it in a tournament, it's gonna be who breaks and maybe if you snipe a leader VP.
You know, the funny thing is the one time I played at a really big convention type, like at my first Nova, I actually captured someone's camp. So, you know,
Yeah.
that worked out.
I mean, so did I actually in that one. That's just because I put 2 knights around the sides and then he just didn't do anything to stop them. They spent the whole game just
Yeah.
going whoop, whoop.
Like, yeah, you pretty much have to go like right away too. And
Yeah.
then, you know, aside from like the boring stuff and like the potential draws, like everything we've said for retrieval, basically, the extra annoyance is I hate setting up in that semi oval shape, whatever, like deployment thing. That is like, oh, that is almost worse than deploying for Maelstrom.
Yeah, because like your opponent might pick a corner with like a forest right in front of it.
Yeah, it can just be really awkward, and then like, you know, and then because you have to march out from the corner for a couple turns, like you can't do the standard thing where you move one guy and then everyone follows along in a line because everyone is at a slightly different angle. So then, you know, you kind of have to like half measure it out, and then everyone's walking in a weird situation. You have to maybe spend an extra turn after leaving that circle to readjust your line. So that's another turn. So it's not just running straight to the center.
Similar complaints as retrieval, but this one's worse because you start even farther apart and nothing happens like the first 45 minutes.
Yeah. Like if you're an all foot army, you're not getting into your opponent's camp.
And there are just certain things that I wouldn't say break the game, but like there are some things that make it the worst experience. If you have, I don't know, a siege weapon or something, and you're just volley firing every turn.
Yeah.
I know, like,
cool.
Yeah, like Scribe, maybe Mercenaries, like those sometimes can be maybe not a great experience for your opponent, but most of the time, if you don't have those models, it's just very predictable.
You know what? I think that might have been the last time I played Storm of the Camp was at Nova 2019. So that's like 5 years ago. I think that might have been the last time I played it at a tournament. It's not great.
Or make the deployment the retrieval deployment.
Or that would make a difference. Yeah. That'd make a big difference.
Okay, so Storm the Camp, average score is 16. So I guess we like it a little bit better than Contest of Champions.
All right, so the second scenario of maneuvering is Reconnoitre.
Ooh.
I have it just above Storm at 14.
I have it at
for
6.
similar reasons.
I have it at 6.
Oh, I thought I was gonna be the wild one, but I have it at 4.
Fuck. Okay, so this one I don't understand because you guys do not like Storm the Camp, just like me. Recon, if you have a 6-inch moving model, means you need to move for 8 turns straight in a line to get models off. How much do you play? Do you play more than 8 turns? Because most boards you can't run in the straight line. So it's going to be more than 8 turns to get models off. And you're not even guaranteed to show up on the first turn. Not until like the 4th turn are you guaranteed to show up. It's just, this is one that I also find the same thing as Storm Camp. It's just like not a lot happens.
So to be fair, though, I think Charles and I have a more against the grain opinion. I think most people do probably would rank it more similar to Ian from what I've heard. So you're being outnumbered here, but I think our opinion is probably more rare. The big difference for Recon compared to Storm the Camp, like you said, it does take time to get across, but the issue is that instead of a little corner to capture, you have their whole board. And also, they can't just sit there and guard it, and it's not like hard to get into. You know, like you were saying, like Retrieval, the feel of capture the flag. I mean, this kind of has that feeling a little bit too. And I find that as long as you're committed with a game plan and you go for it right off the start, which I think more experienced players will know to do, then you will have the opportunity to play the objective. You know, this is where you have to utilize the marches, utilize your cav, and mobility is really important in this one, of course. But even as an infantry army, you know, if you commit early, you can definitely make it. You can't afford any delays. Even if you shoot like 1 or 2 turns, then that does kind of rule you out of the primary objective. I just like it because the games that I have played, especially against a good player who knows what they're doing on Recon, has always ended up being probably my most tactical games.
Yeah, this one is a struggle for me. It's not the bottom 4 that I think absolutely need changes. This one does have interesting things. Again, well, part of it is because you get the time before you engage to do the maneuvering, which becomes really important, which I think is it's a quite interesting thing to happen. It doesn't happen in every scenario. But yeah, I don't know. I've played this game a lot where it's just not a lot happens, or it can get quite intense, or if your opponent has a bunch of I find it very swingy, I guess, is also a really bad thing, right? Like if you show up and your opponent has like Goblin Mercenaries, you're like, cool, I'm screwed. Or like the Scribe or something like that, or like an all cav army, you're like, cool,
Yeah.
I might tie this one.
That might be like a personal experience thing because I don't think I've played a game of Recon where nothing happened. I think it's pretty eventful most of the time. You know, usually at least one of the
Well,
armies will be an aggressor, like someone who's trying to get off the board, if not both.
nothing happening is maybe not the right way to put it. I'll amend that because that is a very valid point. Like it is quite an interesting game, but it's more like the main objective you cannot get scored a lot or not like big scores
Yeah.
is more what I meant by that.
So,
Not that
so,
nothing.
so,
It
so
is
peop-
it is quite interesting.
yeah, so people focus a lot about the main objective running off the board, but I think the most interesting part and tactical part is the fact that your whole army isn't coming on at the same time and you're choosing which warband to roll first and where to appear because you have the whole board edge to potentially defend and you don't know where your enemies warbands are going to spawn. You kind of have to think about how you want to space out your warbands. Do you want like your mobility warband near the corner so you can sneak off, or where are you going to put your shooting? Like where do you expect your opponent to march towards you? Like that part of it is really interesting. You know, it reminds me a little bit of chess sometimes. That's what I like most about it, not even necessarily the part where you run off the board.
I will say I kind of understand Ian because I think the list that he plays are not good in this scenario. So mobility is the biggest factor here. And also, if you don't have mobility, you need high numbers. So you kind of need one or the other to kind of be ready for this scenario.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are kind of convincing me more talking about I think I should have put it a little higher because I don't think it is maybe more towards the middle rather than the bottom half. I think my personal biases are creeping in here a little bit. Also, just as generally not a fast player, the fact that you just have so many turns, like a lot, I find a lot of time gets eaten up before things really start to happen, and then there's the crunch, right? Again, I don't hate this one, like the bottom four ones, like I really don't like this one. It's like, but fine, can be fun.
Oh no. So it seems like this one has tied with Lords of Battle at average score of 8.
All right, so the final scenario of maneuvering is divide and conquer.
I have it at 10.
So I like to think of this one as a Maelstrom one that's actually good. So I put it up at number 4.
That's surprising. I have it at number 5, and
Ooh.
I surprised myself. I thought it would be closer to the middle, but when you actually see all the scenarios laid out in front of you, it just ended up higher.
Yeah. I don't know. For me, it's a nice mix of like separating the deployments so your army has to be mixed up. So you get that kind of maelstrom feeling, but also there's 3 objectives that are very like all of them are important, and it's a combo of a lot of different factors. I don't remember if this is a 1 or a 2 or 25%, but guessing that it's 25% because Charles put it so high.
I guess we don't actually play this one a lot.
Oh, it is a 1 or 2. Wow, what did I
Not as
do?
much. Oh, it is a 1 or 2. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
This man is a heretic.
Um,
I may have to rethink my rankings. So that's definitely not an upside, but I feel like it's like an improved version of hold ground, and
mhm,
I don't know.
mhm.
I like the idea that it forces each player to have their forces split apart, but
Yeah.
still predictable in the way that you know
Yeah.
where everyone is and what direction they're most likely going to be moving.
And then like there's decisions that you have to make right off the bat. Like, do you want to go and try and pin your opponent in one corner and let them have the middle, and then you try and swing around, or do you want to just race for the middle and try and fight there? Or are you gonna like try and you shoot them for a bit with like part of your force and run with the other part? I find the the way everything moves and like maneuvers in this game is quite interesting in these scenarios usually.
Yeah,
Um,
I guess the just everything else that I like in the scenario, and like kind of cancels out with the ending on a 1 or 2.
yeah, I think you guys make good points. I think it probably is a more solid scenario than I'm rating it. I mean, I pretty much rated it smack dab in the middle. So I think on paper it's fine. I think it just doesn't go too well with my play style. Like I I usually find the list that I build struggle a little bit in them. It actually comes out to an average score of 6.3, which actually gives us another tie of with to the death.
All right. The final pool is pool 6, unique scenarios, and the first one is Fog of War. Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I said number one,
It's
Brazil.
2 for me.
So this is another one where like even though it ends on a 1 or 2 for me, I really like everything else. So this one is number 2.
It's just fun. It's just fun. Like you get the known at the known objectives you have to go for. There's the ones that what you're trying to guess what your opponent's going on. Like it's just there's so much stuff going on that's interesting. Like I agree with you. Like it kind of balances out the fact it ends on a 1 or a 2.
Yeah, yeah. There's killing, there's protecting, there's objective like terrain piece grabbing. Yeah, and and
Yeah,
and just like the mind games are unmatched, right? It's just a super classic
yeah.
scenario.
And this is another one where you do end up using like the whole board
Mhm.
rather than just like a 2x2 or a 2x1 section. Like there's stuff going on everywhere usually, or at least models are going out there to try and like pull your opponent and do whatever, right? It's usually very interesting games.
I don't know about you guys, but another thing I like about it is that you don't know how many VPs your opponent has scored. So that it like let's say you feel like you're losing, you're like, oh, well, I don't know. It's just like it's all up in the air. You could feel like you're doing like you're behind, but then you won't really know for sure until the end of the game. I think that part is really interesting.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think a slight caveat here. Obviously I rate it number 2, so I really like it as well. But similar to, I think, the next one we're gonna talk about, or one of the next ones, Assassination, is that with the protecting and kill hero one, like at low points, then everything we just talked about with the mind games, like it just becomes a non-factor when you only have like one secondary hero or something like that. So in North America, we play a lot of like higher points, maybe 700 to 800. So like I think that's why maybe we think this is like such a great scenario, because it's always so epic. But I can see if we have some like 500 point tournaments and stuff too, but I'm just thinking at 500, would Fog also be 1 and 2 for us? Probably not. It just would be kind of less exciting.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So that's the only caveat, but I definitely think it's a top tier scenario. Okay, well, it seems like we've got no negative things to say about this other from that. So it's an average score of 1.7, so that puts Fog of War in the lead.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Well, here I'd say one negative thing about it for you guys, I'm surprised to mention, is you only deploy on the 12th, so you start with a big gap.
Yeah,
So
but
shooting
this one
armies do
is
tend to like
not.
this one.
This one I don't mind as much, given that like you have to capture the terrain piece. Especially like with how some people set up their terrain for this one. Like I've seen people where they count like terrain, like where it's like right near the center too, as a potential like capture point. I find that our boards, we usually set it that it's one of the back terrain that you're able to like pick as a objective piece. But if you're on a board that you can choose objective piece that's like really close to the center, then starting at the center line, it just, I don't know, it would make it a lot less exciting, I think.
Okay. The next one is Clash by Moonlight.
I put it at 9. It's in the middle. It's fine. I would have put it higher, but I understand that having +1 to wound and you come into those matchups, it you can just like get shot off the board, even though it's half the number of turns of shooting. That +1 can be absolutely brutal. And
Yeah.
it can just be like not the most fun games.
Yeah, I have it at 14.
I have it at 4.
Oh, this one.
Oh,
You like him more than Ian. Jeez.
oh,
It's the only
but our
one where
average.
it's the only one where Assault on Lothlorien doesn't get a buff with their night rule.
The hater right there.
Well, that's not an actual reason, but what? So this one, I find it's also a scenario that's thrown in sometimes for predetermined to counter Horde, but I actually think this one is better. It's not as like skewed against Horde as Lords of Battle is. I think that yes, like a Horde army most likely will have more heroes and smaller heroes, so in that sense they are disadvantaged. But a Horde army could totally win this scenario as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool that half your points are about keeping heroes alive and killing enemy heroes, just in general. That's a fun one rather than being specific. Like for a kill the enemy scenario. I do like that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think a lot of people underestimate, like this one is one of the most points you can get for breaking. It's I think 3 and 5, right? So it's quite a bit of
Yeah.
points there. So just as much as killing like small heroes, but also like breaking the opponent. My issues, maybe it's just because I've matched up with Ian a couple times in this one. The same situation of like potentially being like 2 kg. If you have like two like somewhat shooty armies, there's too much of you're poking in to try to get a couple shots. The other person is like the moving shenanigans. You're not getting into combat, but no one wants to like close the gap within the 12 inches. That's probably the worst part. But if you don't have like a situation like that, then yes, it becomes a much better scenario.
Yeah. If it didn't have the night rules, I would probably rank this a lot higher, honestly. But because of the night rules and just the way that kind of messes with stuff, yeah. Like if you play an army that has throwing weapons, this scenario is horrible.
I see where it can be oppressive, especially with throwing weapons in this scenario. But then at the same time, it can also be beneficial for an army that's weak against shooting. I'm thinking in situations where like there are no throwing weapons, then you're limiting the enemy's range to maybe 2 turns of shooting. It severely nerfed siege weapons. So if you're going against, when I played Assault upon Helm's Deep, this was one of the worst because I felt like half my firepower was just not doing anything for the entire game. So there are situations that it helps against shooting armies. It's oppressive, but then like I guess that's mostly throwing weapons, right? That you guys are thinking of.
Yeah, if you can close the gap,
Yeah,
it's
but
not as bad.
just any good shooting list though.
Yeah, good shooting.
I,
Yes.
I'm just
but
saying that, like, let's say you're in Mordor list with no shooting. I can see in some situations the Night Rule helping you rather than making it worse.
yeah, yeah, but it's matchup dependent, right? Obviously, I run a lot of shooting lists, right? Like you know that, and I think depending on what I'm going against, like if I have a bunch of strength 2 bows and I'm going against D5, D6, I would much rather have 2.5 turns of shooting at +1 to wound than 4 at just regular. You know what I mean? Like the +1, it can be absolutely oppressive,
Yeah,
especially if you have
not.
any like rerolls and combinations.
Yeah, it's really good against like elite armies and like slow moving armies. So like I guess like dwarves is probably like the worst scenario for them to try to close
Oh
the
yeah,
gap.
dwarves hate this. Their armor turns into nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, so the average score for this one is a 9. So that is smack dab in the middle.
All right, let's talk about the last one, which is Assassination.
We're so close.
So
Um,
I had it at 13.
I had it at 10, so one less than Clash. It's
I
Yeah.
had it at 9. Pretty similar.
it. I don't know. It almost feels like a combination of like fog and also contest.
Hmm.
It kind of feels like a comment. Like your heroes really matter in this one for killing, but it is also just doing the killing and like having a fight, having a scrap matter a lot. So it's like it's yeah, it's a good scenario. It's a fun twist on the kill each other kind of stuff. And goes in the middle for me. But I guess I should say more importantly, it's not all of your points rely on your assassin actually doing anything. It's if your assassin does stuff, it's a bonus, but it's not the if your assassin doesn't get the kill, it's not like you get no points. You still get a bunch of points for killing your target, which it's a nice balance, right? And it rewards good play if you actually manage to use your assassin to do the final kill on your target.
Yeah. I guess my issue with this one is the scoring is a little bit high for the heroes. And then like when you have certain tech pieces, if you have like a legless or offensive magic caster, they're just close to unbeatable in this scenario if your opponent doesn't have the same. If you have several heroes, unless you hide them all, they kind of have their pick. And then those tech pieces are just so good at pinging even one wound or getting a kill off a smaller hero that it's hard to come back from in that case.
Yeah. I know I didn't rank it super high. It's not, I don't hate this one. I just think a lot of the times that the assassinating part doesn't really happen. It's just, it feels like a normal fighty scenario. And then a point brought up earlier, in Fog of War, right? This one is also the same, where at low points, the suspense kind of not there. It's just like, yeah, it's going to be
Yeah.
this captain against this captain level hero. Yeah.
All right. So the ranking for this one is 10.7, so pretty close to the center. And then so I'll go through our entire ranking from bottom to the top. So nothing has changed. It's still Heirlooms at the very bottom. And then followed by Contest of Champions, and then Storm the Camp, and then Retrieval, and then Seize the Prize, and then Hold Ground, and then Assassination, and then Command the Battlefield, Clash by Moonlight, and then a tie between Lords of Battle and Reconnoitre. And then it's Capture and Control, and then it's Destroy the Supplies, and then a tie between To the Death and Divide and Conquer, then Breakthrough, Domination, and then Fog of War. So,
Cool.
yeah, that's our official ranking.
Interesting. It's good talk.
Yeah.
Nice,
So
some nice controversy there. I think everybody had a little bit.
we want to hear from our viewers. Feel free to give your ranking of all 18 scenarios below and let us know how it compares with ours and who had the hottest pick, the most controversial pick and ranking. Let us know as well. I just want to do a quick shout out of the sponsor of the video, Baron of Dice. They make some great Middle-earth SBG dice as well as dice for many other games. Go check out their products on their website. You can use our promo code WEST for 5% off your order. And also want to thank Mithril Brush Painting Competition for sponsoring this video. If you want more information on the competition, as well as how to enter and how to support the competition, just check out the link below. Also want to say that we're doing a Patreon promotion where after 1 month of signing up, we will be sending out 1 pack of dice. I want to give a quick shout out to Brandon Ridge, top supporter of our channel. Also a quick thank you to all of our patrons over on Patreon for supporting us. If you want to see extra content, see videos early, and other perks, please check out all of the perks in the link below. All right. Thank you all for watching and look forward to the next episode of Into the West.